All right, so ready to dive in. We're tackling a big one today. Challenging behaviors, right? Specifically in early childhood education.
Yeah, it's something every educator, and honestly, every parent too, has to grapple with at some point.
Exactly. And we've got this fascinating excerpt from Search Network. It's titled Addressing Challenging Behavior in Early Childhood Education. And I gotta say, some of these insights, well, they really got me thinking.
It's a pretty insightful piece.
Yeah. And you know what really stood out? This idea that these behaviors, these outbursts, tantrums, meltdowns, they're not just kids being difficult, they're actually trying to communicate something.
Absolutely. It's especially true for those little ones who haven't quite mastered, expressing themselves with words yet.
Right, right. So it's almost like we have to, what, play detective? Decipher the code of the meltdown?
Exactly. Think of it as a signal, like, hey, something's not right here. The real challenge, though, figuring out what that message is.
Okay, so less about reacting to the tantrum itself and more about understanding the why behind it.
You got it. And the article actually suggests a really cool tool for this. It's called an ABC chart. Stands for antecedent, behavior, consequence.
Oh, I've heard of those.
Yeah, so you're essentially gathering data, right? Like a detective. What happened right before the behavior? What did the child actually do? And then what happened afterward?
So instead of just reacting emotionally in the moment, you're taking a step back, looking for patterns.
Precisely. It helps you make decisions based on, well, evidence, not just emotion.
So like, if I'm constantly frustrated by, say, a coworker who's always late, could an ABC chart help me figure that out too?
Absolutely. You might find, maybe it always happens after a certain meeting or on days when they have to drop their kids off at school. It helps you pinpoint potential triggers, things you can then address.
Okay, I'm seeing how this could apply way beyond just dealing with kids.
It really does. And once you start understanding those triggers, that's where the concept of positive guidance comes in.
So not just punishment, but like steering them in the right direction.
Yeah, it's more about setting those clear boundaries and expectations, but doing it in a way that's, supportive, encouraging.
I like that. So less criticism, more guidance.
Exactly. Think of it like a gardener tending a plant. You're not punishing the plant for not growing the way you want. You're creating the conditions for it to thrive.
Okay, that's a helpful analogy.
Yeah.
But doesn't that take more work, more effort
Yeah.
than just, saying no?
It can, yeah, but the results are worth it. When children know what to expect, it actually reduces anxiety for them, helps them feel safe.
Makes sense. Structure and predictability, those are good things.
Definitely. And it's not just for kids either, right? Think about how you feel when your boss gives you clear instructions versus leaving you to guess what they want.
Oh, totally. Clear expectations make everything smoother.
Right. So this idea of creating the right environment, it applies everywhere. And speaking of environment, the article talked about how the actual design of a classroom, the layout, the setup, it can actually play a big role in preventing these challenging behaviors.
Oh yeah, the classroom is ecosystem concept.
Exactly. Like, picture this. A classroom that's cluttered, chaotic, tons of stuff everywhere.
Oh, I could already feel the stress building.
Right. It can be overwhelming for anyone, especially young children. That kind of environment, it can lead to frustration, acting out, you name it.
Whereas a well-organized space, clear areas for different activities, that promotes focus, engagement.
Precisely. It's like the environment itself sends a message of, well, calm and order.
Makes sense. I'm very visual, so I totally get that. You walk into a spa versus like a noisy, crowded restaurant, your whole mindset shifts.
It's true. It's all about creating spaces that support the behaviors we want to see.
Right. And it's not just about the physical space, right? It's also about the activities, the things we're engaging those kids in.
Absolutely. The article highlighted activities that foster empathy and cooperation, where kids are learning to understand each other's feelings.
So it's not just about managing behavior in the moment. It's about actually teaching them how to relate to each other in a healthy way.
That's the goal. And honestly, we could all learn a thing or two from that, right?
No doubt. But what about those moments when, despite our best efforts, a challenging behavior does pop up? What do we do then?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but that's a topic for our next deep dive. Stay tuned.
This episode is brought to you by Networks Training Academy, your go-to resource for early childhood education training. From entry-level courses to continuing education and first aid CPR certification, we're here to support your journey. Visit networksllc.net and take the next step in your career today.
All right. So last time we were talking about, those moments when a challenging behavior actually pops up. What do? We've got the why down, we've got the environment, right? But what about in the moment?
Yeah, well, the article, it really stresses starting with this thing called proactive classroom management. It's all about like setting the stage, for positive behavior right from the start.
So before things even have a chance to escalate.
Exactly. You're being proactive, not reactive. And a big part of that is routines, clear expectations. Remember, we talked about predictability.
Yeah, how kids, they thrive on knowing what to expect.
Exactly. Consistent routines, a daily schedule, it can do wonders. It's like it reduces anxiety for them, helps them build this internal sense of like structure and control.
Yeah. Like having those external guardrails helps them build those internal ones.
Exactly. And going back to the physical space, remember we talked about the classroom as an ecosystem?
Yeah, yeah.
So think about a classroom that's just like cluttered, chaotic.
Oh, man, just thinking about it makes me anxious.
Right. Imagine being a kid in that environment. It's overwhelming. That kind of setup, it leads to frustration, acting out.
Whereas like a well-organized space, you've got clear areas for different activities, that sends a different message.
Totally. It promotes focus, engagement. It's like almost like the environment itself. It's like it's saying, hey, things are calm here. There's order.
It's like walking into a spa versus, a loud, chaotic restaurant. Your whole mood changes.
Exactly. So we design these spaces that, well, they support those behaviors that we want to see.
Right, right. So physical space, check. But then it's also about the activities, right? What we're having them do.
Absolutely. The article, it highlighted activities that build empathy, cooperation, where kids are learning to, understand and value each other's feelings.
So you're not just managing behavior in the moment. You're actually teaching them how to like relate to each other in a positive way.
Exactly. And I think there's a lot we could all learn from that.
No doubt.
Yeah.
But okay, what about when, you've done all that, you've set up the environment, you've got the routines, but a challenging behavior still happens? What do we do in that moment?
So one really powerful tool is redirection. It's about gently steering a child away from that, undesirable behavior and towards something more appropriate.
So not just saying no, but giving them like an alternative.
Exactly. Like imagine a child is, I don't know, getting aggressive with a toy. Instead of just no, which can, feel kind of like shutting them down, you might redirect them to a different area, maybe an activity that's more calming, like building blocks.
So you're acknowledging their energy, but channeling it in a different direction.
Exactly. It's not about punishment, right? It's about giving them an outlet, a different way to express themselves, and don't forget about positive reinforcement.
Oh, right. Catching them being good.
Yeah. Instead of focusing on the negative, we want to acknowledge those efforts. Like, let's say a child, they're usually disruptive during circle time, but, they manage to sit quietly for a few minutes.
You might say, hey, I noticed you were sitting so nicely listening to the story. That's really helpful.
Exactly. You're reinforcing that behavior, making it more likely to happen again. And speaking of reinforcement, this whole idea of naming and acknowledging feelings, that's huge here.
Right. We talked about modeling emotional awareness, but how does that actually work in those tricky situations?
So imagine a child, they're having a meltdown, right? Because their block tower just fell over.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
Instead of saying, like, don't be upset, which honestly can make them feel worse, you could say, you seem really angry that your tower fell down. It's okay to feel angry, but we don't hit our friends when we're angry.
Oh, I see. So you're validating their feelings, but you're also setting a clear boundary.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like you're saying, I see you, I hear you, and I'm here to help you through this.
It's powerful stuff. But, we've talked about this consistency piece, right, between home and school. How do we actually make that happen? It's not like you can just tell parents what to do.
Of course not. It's all about collaboration. Communication. Imagine like having regular check-ins with parents, maybe even a shared behavior journal.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, where everyone, teachers, parents, they can jot down observations, strategies that are working. It's about being on the same page. Like if you're teaching a child to use their words to express anger at school, imagine how much more effective that is if their parents are, using those same phrases at home.
It's like you're creating this web of support where everyone's, speaking the same language.
Exactly. It's all about consistency, predictability. But remember, every child is different. What works for one might not work for another.
Right. Right. And sometimes a child might need more individualized support,
Absolutely. If a child is struggling, with persistent challenging behaviors, it's important to consider, well, could there be something else going on?
like maybe a developmental delay, sensory processing issues, even past trauma.
Exactly. These are all things that could be, contributing to what we're seeing.
So we need to be aware of those possibilities and be ready to reach out for professional help if needed.
Absolutely. Knowing your limits and being willing to ask for help, that's a sign of strength, not weakness.
And honestly, sometimes just knowing that you're not alone in this, that can be a huge relief.
It really can. We've covered a lot here, proactive strategies, in the moment techniques, but there's one more piece we need to talk about, and that's self-care.
Oh yeah, this is a big one, especially for educators. Dealing with challenging behaviors all day, every day can be so draining.
It really can, and if we're not taking care of ourselves, we can't show up for those kids the way they need us to.
So what are some practical things educators can do? I know the article mentioned mindfulness, stress management techniques.
Yeah, those are great starting points. Mindfulness, even just a few minutes of, deep breathing each day, it can make a difference. And stress management, there's so many things you can try. Walking in nature, listening to calming music. But, I think it goes beyond just individual practices.
What do you mean?
I think there needs to be a systemic approach to supporting educator well-being, advocating for smaller class sizes, more support staff,
Yeah.
better compensation.
Yeah, if we want educators to be able to approach these challenging behaviors with patience and compassion, they need to be working in an environment that supports them too. It's
Yeah.
like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah. Exactly. And, all this, it makes me wonder, does this approach, this focus on understanding, empathy, does it actually make a difference in the long run?
That's a great question, and one we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. Stay tuned. So we've talked a lot about, strategies for dealing with these challenging behaviors, everything from like understanding the why behind them to creating these supportive environments, teaching kids how to like handle those big feelings. But I'm curious, as we wrap up this deep dive, what kind of long-term impact can this approach actually have, not just for the kids, but for like everyone involved?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's something that goes way beyond just like managing behavior in the moment. It's about like building this whole culture of empathy and understanding. And that can have like ripple effects throughout a child's life and even beyond.
Okay, I love a good ripple effect. But can you like give me a concrete example of what that might actually look like?
Sure. So think about it this way. When we approach these challenging behaviors with curiosity and compassion, right? We're kind of modeling those qualities for the kids around us. We're showing them that it's okay to make mistakes, to have these big feelings, and that there's always a way to like work through those challenges.
So it's not just about like teaching them how to behave in a classroom. It's more about teaching them like how to be a good human.
Exactly. And those lessons, they go way beyond those early childhood years.
Yeah.
Imagine a child who's grown up in an environment where their emotions are validated, where they're encouraged to express themselves constructively, and where they see the adults around them, like modeling those empathy skills, problem-solving skills.
I could already picture that person being like a rock star in all their relationships
Yeah.
with friends, family, partners,
Mhm.
even coworkers.
Yeah. Right. They're more likely to approach conflict with curiosity instead of like defensiveness, to try to understand rather than just blame. And those are qualities that can really make a difference in building strong relationships throughout their lives.
And wouldn't you say those qualities are like in high demand these days?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with all the division and polarization we see everywhere, it seems like we need more people who can like actually listen to each other, find that common ground.
Absolutely. And it all starts with those early experiences, right? Those fundamental lessons we learn about how to interact with the world and each other.
Something else that really stood out to me in this article was the emphasis on self-care for educators.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that ties into this bigger picture too, right? Because if we want educators to model empathy and compassion, they need to be feeling those things themselves.
That's so important. It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. If educators are burned out, stressed, feeling depleted, it's going to be that much harder for them to show up for those kids the way they need to.
So it's not just about like individual self-care practices. It's about creating a system that actually supports their well-being.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that educators are human beings too, with their own needs and limits, and that when we invest in their well-being, we're ultimately investing in the well-being of the children they care for.
It's all connected, isn't it? It's like this web of empathy and support,
Yep.
starting with the educators, extending to the kids, and then rippling out into the world.
I love that image, and it reminds me that while we've been focusing on early childhood education here, these principles, they really apply to all of us, no matter where we are in life.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the takeaway here is that these challenging behaviors, they're actually an opportunity. They're a chance to teach and to learn, to grow and to connect. And when we approach them with understanding and compassion, we're not just addressing the behavior itself. We're creating this ripple effect of empathy that can touch so many lives.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and I really hope our listeners will walk away from this deep dive feeling empowered to embrace those challenges and
Hmm.
to create a more compassionate and understanding world, one interaction at a time.
That's a wonderful thought to end on. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey.